So just the other day, we got the Zenless Zone Zero live stream for version 1.7. Yeah, it's 7. We got the live stream for version 1.7, and today I want to give you guys my thoughts and opinions on pretty much Vivian, and then I'll break that down for the next video with Hugo and blah, 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 blah. But in today's video, we're doing Vivian. So right off the bat, I want to talk about Vivian as a character, and I feel like the live stream footage did a little bit of justice when showing this, but some of the stuff I'm still a little bit confused on. So I'm gonna have to wait until I get my hands on CE server, and then I'll have more I guess more experience, obviously, because I'd have it, but whatever. So from what I can tell, Vivian's playstyle seems to be more like a rush down agent, which for those that are not familiar with the terms, you know, I like to explain stuff. Rush down just means that the character is like in your face. They want to get up close and personal to whatever the opponent is, the enemy, and then, you know, just give them the hands. Yeah, that seems more appropriate. I guess in Vivian's case, she doesn't really give you hands. She like, fun fact, so she fights with an umbrella or parasol, to be fair. Shout out Skullgirls. But anyway, she pulls out a blade. If you guys pay attention to the footage, she doesn't actually fight you with the parasol. She fights you with this hidden blade that she pulls out of the end of the parasol. I think it's pretty cool. Anyway, she's more of like a rush down character from what we can tell, but this is more like the solo play style for this character. So it kind of feels like she's going to be one of those characters where she really just plays in and out of the field, so to speak. But I think it's a little different, right? I have a couple notes here that I want to break down, and eventually I'll get to it, but skipping through all my notes and going to kind of like the bottom half of this, she feels more along the lines of a better Burnice. I know that sounds kind of weird, but you guys know how I am, and as much as I love Burnice, she's one of my favorite characters. I constantly say that Burnice is one of the characters that just doesn't have a nice flow to her, right? And so sometimes people are confused on what I mean by that, or when I say that the team doesn't really flow smoothly. That doesn't mean that the team doesn't work. It doesn't mean that the team doesn't do damage. It means that there is not a proper, in Genshin Impact or Wuthering Waves terms, you don't have a proper rotation. There is no do this, swap out, do this, ult here, swap out, do. She doesn't have it. The way that the nitro fuel works completely disrupts any type of rotation that you would be doing. So you have to pay attention to what's going on. You have to meter manage the entire team. If you don't, you're going to have tons of situations where you're pretty much playing Burnice and she has no nitro fuel whatsoever. So when I'm looking at Vivian's gameplay and I'm kind of dissecting what they showed off in the live stream, Vivian seems like a better Burnice because I don't think she's attached to any kind of meter outside of the, I think they were called fluttering flock or like flight feathers, something like that. I'm just going to call them feathers. All right. So her feathers, right, the stacks that she gets for those, it seems like that's going to be her meter, which is totally fine, but it looks a lot more manageable and it seems to be on a steady rotation. So whenever, based off what we were looking at the live stream and the information they gave us, let me just break down fluttering flock state. I'm not calling it that. I'm probably gonna call this like flight state or parasol state, something like that, whatever sounds cooler. Okay, breaking down the parasol state, she needs flight feathers for this to work. How many? We can see that in the top, it's probably like 5, but I'm pretty positive based off the way her moveset looks, you probably don't need all 5 in order to jump or get into the parasol state. I think she just needs 1, but these are 2 different icons. If you pay attention to the top left of the screen, you actually see that one of these icons is hollow. It looks like a empty coin, a purple coin. Then it gets filled up after a certain move or something like that happens, and then she dishes it out. What I'm thinking is that the filled up move is the one that needs flight. So before that, she has something else, another token, right? And this token, I think, is guard feathers is what they mentioned. So flight feathers and then guard feathers. I don't exactly know what guard feathers do outside of letting her do the feather blooms, I think is what it's called, the drops down, whatever, right? But that's neither here nor there. We'll get onto that whenever the time comes. EX skill, which is Violet Requiem, is going to refill the flight feathers, enters the parasol state or the floating state, and then that kind of opens up the door for a lot of things. Now, naturally, whenever I was looking at this, my fighting game brain kicked in, or my action game brain, right, whatever you want to call it, it kicked in, and I'm like, okay, what can she do from that, right? You wouldn't make a character that flies. It's the first character we have in the game that has this floating type of state that just, you know, essentially flies. And what makes it different is that she actually hovers. So there's a couple implications that you could think of that, right? Like she hovers and nothing can touch her, right? She just can't get hit, which probably isn't the case because Pompey would like smack the shit out of her, I'm pretty sure. But if that wasn't gonna happen, then you have situations where she flies or hovers around, she can move around, and maybe she has a different attack inside of the parasol state. Based off what they showed in the live stream, I don't think this is the case. I think she quite literally goes into the air for nothing. When I say for nothing, I'm only only talking about the attack animations that come from that. So she does a move, goes in the air, does a crash down move, right? The dive kick is what I'm going to call it. And that's the end of that. I think that's kind of like the most wasted potential in a character possible. I hate that. That's a whole different video that we're going to talk about sometime down the line. I don't know if it'll be next week or whatever, but you guys hear me talk about it on stream pretty soon here, or you can hear me talk about it on stream pretty soon here. I don't like that Zenless, the team, as much as I praise them, I despise when they make really cool animations or really intricate things a part of a character's kit, but then it's completely useless. Like, it just has no use whatsoever. Nekomata's back attacks are a really good example of what I'm talking about. And now we have Vivian, who has this parasol or flight state where the only thing she can do in flight is come back down. There's just no point in having a character like that. There could have been so many different things they could have done, right? Like enter flight state, and now she zip zap zooms across the field, right? So now if you press EX skill again, she does a crash down. But if you don't and you do regular attacks, maybe she gets like a string of 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2 that allows her to do like quick hits while she's in the air, or maybe shoot down missiles while she's in the air, or even better, and this is my, again, fighting game brain thinking, Marvel vs. Capcom style. If she enters or leaves the field, right? Let's say you swap out and she's in the parasol, the flight state, then whenever you attack an enemy, instead of the bombs just existing from nowhere, treat it like how Astra is, right? Astra's on the field doing the thing. Maybe it's like, okay, well, if Vivian's in the flight state, then her, what do they call it again? The feather blooms. Her feather blooms are actually missiles that come from, because she shoots off missiles, by the way. There's an animation in the thing where she shoots off missiles from her, beneath her dress or the parasol, something like that. You could have easily made that a part of the animation and made it a lot more cooler. I don't know. That's just, like I said, that's just me. Maybe I'm being nitpicky. Maybe I'm asking for too much. I don't know, but it just irks the crap out of me. Moving along, basic attack suspension is going to be what the crash down or dive kick move is. Now we can talk about feather bloom. Feather bloom looks nasty. That's what I wanted to say. Again, a better Burnice, if you will. And that's not even to say that Burnice and Vivian don't work together, right? I do think they will work together. We'll talk about that in a bit towards the end of the video or towards the later half of the video. But right now, Feather Bloom looks a little interesting. A Bloom seems to be her pop version of an anomaly. Question mark on this because I don't fully know what this is. I can tell that it's something, right? She's triggering something, and you see a lot of a blooms pop up. This looks very similar to polarity disorder from Yanagi, where Yanagi triggers a disorder, and then right after that, boom, another one pops up and it says polarity. So I feel like, well, I guess it doesn't say polarity, but whatever, you know what I'm talking about. I feel like that's kind of closer to what this is, and it looks like it's controlled. I love when agents have something that is fully in the player's control and it's not outside of their control, because that gives you the ultimate way to play the character or play the team to your advantage in any given situation. So you might be asking, like, how do you, I guess you're not really asking that, you probably saw the thing, right? Yeah, you definitely saw the live stream. I don't know why you wouldn't watch the live stream. Anyway, when another agent uses the EX special, that's when a bloom is going to pop. Now, I like this. I think this is interesting because it's using the guard feathers, if I'm not mistaken, in order for this to work, on top of the feather blooms that are actually triggering. So another thing that feather bloom does is that whenever it triggers an extra anomaly, or rather feather bloom will trigger an extra anomaly of X affliction. That means that if you already have burn or shock on the enemy and then a bloom hits, right, the feather bloom, it'll trigger whatever they have again. So if they triggered shock, a bloom or the feather bloom happens, boom, it'll do it, and then it triggers another shock. Something they mentioned in the live stream was that this also will be able to, she can do this off field. So she's the second character that we have officially coming into the game that is able to do this off field, or maybe the third. I don't specifically remember if Astra is able to trigger Ether off of the field or not. I never really pay attention to it, but maybe she can. So if Astra can do it, then Vivian's the third character. If Astra can't do it, Vivian is the second character that's going to be coming into the game that's going to be able to trigger an anomaly off the field, which is amazing for characters like Yanagi or Jane or even Miyabi, to be fair, because now you do have the potential to run Miyabi. Like if you have an M1 Miyabi, oh, you're cooking. I low-key want to pull M1 Miyabi specifically for this reason, because it allows you to pretty much main Miyabi on the field the entire time while everyone else in the background just kind of supports her. It's really cool. Something else that's cool about Vivian's Feather Bloom is that if she hits them on the field, so if she's the one on field, the driver, and she triggers Feather Bloom this way, then she's actually going to trigger or inflict Prophecy. Prophecy is basically going to be the poison DoT. And again, this can trigger off field, or rather while she's off field, the ether pops happen just like Burnice. So if this prophecy mechanic that she has or attribute that she has is conditional, so maybe there's a way where like if X happens, then prophecy is reset, or if X happens, prophecy is applied. And then based off X might be like, you know, if the anomaly builds all the way up, or if EX skill happens while they have anomaly on them, anything like that. If there are some conditions to this, this could absolutely lead to a permanent poison on the enemy, which is different than Burnice, because Burnice technically could have permanent nitro fuel on the enemy, but in order for that to work, you would have to have an infinite amount of nitro fuel or energy in order to do that, right? In Vivian's case, if it's based off of her guard feathers or the flight feathers, the feather system as a whole, if it's based off that, then maybe there's a way where, because she's building up the feathers so often, and it looks like, because I'm pretty sure they said it in the live stream, but I could be wrong, there's a stab move that she gets. It's like a forward lunge, a little a drill, right? Like a cannon spike, or spiral arrow. It's like a spiral arrow looking move from Street Fighter Cammy. It looks like, from what they said, she gets this off of multiple things. I think it's the BA4. So if you do BA4 and then you do it again, she goes from the daunting state or something like that, her little prissy state, and then she does the drill kick or the drill move. If you dodge counter, I think is also that, but I might be mistaking her for Hugo. I'd have to go back and check. But point being is that she gets this from a multitude of moves. So there's a couple of different things that have my interest in Vivian gameplay as a whole that I need to see more of, or at least I need to play it in order to figure out how this is going to work. But speaking of playing, we can kind of dive right into that, right? I do have the builds. I have some ideas for the builds and whatnot, but let's just talk about for a second the teams, or rather the characters that I think she's going to work with. The obvious teammates are going to be the Anomaly characters, right? So Yanagi, Miyabi, Burnice, all that kind of stuff. But I think in Vivian's case specifically, based off what we have, I think she wants a lot more control. And I know I've been using that word a lot. When I say control, I'm talking about the ability to trigger when you want to trigger the anomaly, right? Haha, trigger. Anyway, I'm talking about triggering the anomaly, or popping the anomaly is usually what I say whenever you want to pop it. So in Vivian's case, because she has the feather blooms as well as the blooms, and then they can trigger it on top of something else, right? Like a double. Yanagi and Vivian automatically look like the #1 team for her. Yanagi having disorder and polarity disorder, and then Vivian also having a very similar concept or very similar mechanic, having the bloom and feather bloom on top of that. Plus, unlike Yanagi, where shock is like tick, tick, boom, yeah? All the shocks that would have had, they immediately erupt, and then it's tick, 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 tick. It looks like Vivian has her own poison. Well, it doesn't look like she has it. She has her own poison to go along with the pops from shock. So now you have a consistent flow of damage the entire game. And I think that's very important to point out, right? And then, again, this is conceptually because I haven't played her yet. Conceptually, you have poison the entire time, and then you have shock the entire time. Why am I saying the entire time? Because if we take the concept, or rather what we already have with Yanagi, Yanagi is the second fastest shock applier in the game. Vivian might be the fastest ether applicator in the game. If she applies ether anywhere near Yanagi's level, it's over. And now you have a consistent flow of ether, corruption, boom, right? Which is a big explosion on its own. You also have prophecy, which is poison. You have the shock, and then you also have the double disorders from Yanagi. So now you'll have situations where, remember in the previous video where I told you guys about like Miyabi and Yanagi, and I was talking about control with Yi? A lot of you guys didn't really understand what I was saying, even though I explained it very, very clear, but a lot of you guys weren't understanding that because you were, I'm not want to blame anybody, right? I'm not trying to attack anyone, but it was very much a trigger is like, I like trigger because trigger lets me play without thinking. So it works, and this is better. A lot of your responses were like that. It's okay. You know, that I'm not attacking. But to finish explaining the Miyabi thing with Yanagi, Yanagi has something that not many players do. You don't have to do it. That's what makes Yanagi so strong. But if you do it, it makes her even stronger. In fact, it makes her absurdly broken. Yanagi has the ability to trigger disorder without finishing off the anomaly meter, popping the anomaly, right? That's where that term comes from. So if Vivian is poisoning the enemy forever, and she's also triggering or rather using the blooms or the feather blooms, whatever, a bloom is happening from whoever applies or triggers an anomaly. You now have the ability to leave poison on the enemy for as long as possible, zip, zap, zoom with Yanagi, and then pop corruption whenever it is that you want to. If you're playing with Miyabi, you now have the ability to hold on. Well, I guess you couldn't do that with like Miyabi and Vivian because they don't have the same thing as Yanagi. But if you found a way to do that, so yeah, like I said, or like I was saying, this seems like the strongest team, Yanagi and Vivian. You could add whatever you want in the middle. It truly doesn't matter. You could put Astra in there, but if you add Astra, like I said, if either of these characters have the ability to pop off field, so Astra and Vivian have the ability to pop off field, it's going to make controlling what I'm talking about a lot harder. But if Vivian is the only one on the team that does it, then it makes controlling it a lot easier, because now you can fill up the bar as you're attacking and you can watch it happen, right? In Astra's case, it'd be a little bit different. But going into that, I think Astra and I think Astra on that team, I think she might be the best in slot. I still want to play around with it. I'm still feeling Seth. Seth gives the anomaly, Seth gives the shield. And even though we saw that Vivian had dodge, because we understand that a lot of players don't use the tools in the game for the character to their advantage. And what I mean by that is Vivian's auto dodge, as well as the spiral arrow move that she has after BA4, for instance, or dodge counter. Well, that has a perfect dodge attached to it as well, right? So they said that it has a perfect dodge property attached to it, but triggering that isn't as easy. Same thing with Yanagi. In order for you to use Yanagi's parry, which took us like a couple of days to actually figure out, but in order for you to use Yanagi's parry, Yanagi needs to be enhanced. She needs to be in her EX form, or the multi-move form, whatever. And then she needs to use base skill, so her whatever skill where she does the little thing with the Naginata, right? And then it will parry. There are a couple of different ways that you can get this out, but in order for you to get it out, you have to already be doing something. That something can't be like BA1-2, right? You have to be past BA1 to basically BA3. You have to be already past BA3 doing electric moves, and then she does it and she'll get the parry. If you don't do that, you don't get the parry, you get hit. Vivian, same thing, right? You got to get all the way to BA4 or do a dodge counter and then hope that you don't get hit, right? Just be in the other state. And from what we saw, they didn't say anything of like, hey, if you cancel this, you go into this state. If you do like BA1-2 cancel, you go into the state. If you do BA1-2 regular skill, she goes into the state. They didn't mention anything like that, so that's something that I definitely want to test out and figure out, like, if she has the ability to do that, because then that would elevate her gameplay, or at least elevate her ability to do some stuff. But as of right now, Astra's okay, or rather the best, because of the massive attack boost that she's going to be able to give you, the quick assist, being able to bring both characters in and out flawlessly. Really good stuff. Seth might help with that because of the defensive mechanics that Seth applies, as well as the anomaly shielding boost, or the anomaly boosting shield that he gives you, and he's going to be able to inflict the stun, and he also helps Yanagi be able to do it. I know some of you guys, there was like one comment that I got saying something about like are you playing Anomaly Seth, like question mark? Okay, I guess like that's a horrible something about like how that wasn't the play. You should be playing Anomaly Seth. Like, I don't this is kind of the stuff that I talk about all the time, where I'm like, yo, there's a lot of people that say something about Seth and they don't actually play Seth. You should 100% be playing Anomaly Seth. Like, he gives himself plus 100 AP or something like that, whatever the number is, right? He gives his teammate plus 100 AP, and then he boosts himself up. He gives himself guaranteed critical hits, right? If you have M6, for instance, and then the rest of his mindscapes just tremendously help his game plan to make it a lot more smoother. We have a whole different video about Seth breaking down every single thing that you can do so you can keep the pressure going at the same time. We've seen Vivian's attacks, right? We've seen her be able to do stuff. She has a whole thing where, like, hey, if she's already in the flight state, the parasol state, and you swap out, she's automatically going to crash down. The animation is long enough so that you could get out a Seth fully charged EX skill. That's important for teams like that. It's important to pay attention to animations, what you can and can't cancel, or what looks cancelable, things like that. Now, by no means am I saying Seth is the best. That's why I said I would like to test it so that I can figure out what feels better, what plays better, and what gives the strongest results. Until I do that, I can't really tell you like what's going to be the best. I'm just giving you guys ideas. Same thing with Miyabi and Vivian. Miyabi and Vivian is going to be very strong, but you want something in the middle that's probably going to help the both of them, I guess. I really don't know what it is, to be fair. And then there's like the final thing. Oh, and then Jane and Vivian would be really good too. Burnice and Vivian is also going to be really good. I think she's going to work with every single anomaly character in the game, but I think the way she plays with these anomaly characters is going to be slightly different. We're going to talk about builds in just a bit, because I also think depending on your partner, that changes your build, and that's very important to pay attention to or notice, because that's a whole different thing that I want to talk about, by the way, a whole different video. Zenless is one of the games where you should not have static builds. I know that sounds crazy, especially coming from a Hoyo game. Your build should not be static. You should not have one single build for every single thing in the game, or every single application or team or combo or whatever. Your build should be changing based on what you're doing, whether or not you're fighting something a specific way or you're using a specific team. But that's a whole different thing that we're going to talk about later on, because not everybody is ready to accept that. beyond that point, going back to what I'm talking about, the builds, before we do that, I want to briefly mention, I actually think Vivian is going to work with attack type characters. I don't know how. I have some thoughts. I'm going to keep those thoughts to myself for now until CE server, but I think Vivian might work with certain attack type characters, and I think it'd be a pretty interesting mechanic or a pretty interesting combo that she'd be able to get away with. This is going to be similar to if you were to play something like Soldier 11, Lighter, and then Burnice, right? Or Soldier 11, whatever, and then Burnice, or Miyabi, whatever, and then Evelyn or something like that. Yeah, like I think being able to mix up some of this stuff will be good for the characters, but again, completely dependent on what's going on. Now we can go on the build and W engine. Okay, so final thing here we're talking about is going to be Phaethon's Melody or Hormone Punk. Or right, my bad, 4-piece Phaethon's Melody, I think is going to be her best in slot. There's also a contender for Hormone Punk. This is something that I'm probably going to have to test out a little bit, but I kind of feel like it's going to work just based on the quick swapping, especially if you have Ash from the team, but who knows, maybe you don't need it. Another thing that I want to talk about is the sets, or rather the disk drives. So I'm thinking main stats going to be attack percent, AP, AM, and then maybe crit if you could squeeze it in there. But if you can't, it's not a big deal. And honestly, this is literally just me doing a greedy thing, right? Saying maybe crit is not saying it's going to be the best, but I'm acknowledging that she does do some physical hits in her kit that are not based on her anomaly. The anomaly is from Anomaly, and all the physical attacks that she does is based on her actual attack. So it wouldn't be off-putting for her to have crit, just like when it comes to Yanagi, a lot of the moves that they do is just raw damage, okay? So if you happen to have crit, that'll probably be more positive for you. If you don't, it's not a big deal, and then you just keep playing the character the way you want. Phaethon's Melody is pretty much made for her, so this is going to be the easy 4-piece that everyone's going for and you should be prepping for right now. Given the fact that you have 2 different EX special conditions, I think that's going to be pretty interesting in how you can use Phaethon's Melody. Chaotic Metal could work, like I said, if you're doing a forced crit hybrid build, and then Hormone Punk is literally just for the 25% attack boost, but the 10-second cooldown is kind of going to be about it. And then of course, finally, Branching Blade is literally just if you're cracked on subs. Like there's probably no reason you should be running Branching Blade, but if you get really greedy, you get really lucky, you could run Branching Blade, and then you could have all the AP in the world, all the AM in the world, and you could still get off your 50% crit rate, and every other attack you're hitting some crits. So that'd be kind of cool, kind of crazy. I'm not gonna hold you. Now, earlier I mentioned that you should be running different sets, and my ideas for that happen to also translate with Vivian. So I'm gonna just talk about 2 ideas for now. Again, these are just concepts. So once I test them fully, then I'll have more concrete data on that. But right now, 4-piece Phaethon with a 2-piece Swing Jazz is probably gonna be one of the sets that you're pushing. Ideally, this is gonna be paired up with Yanagi, because Yanagi is gonna be the one that's on field a little bit more than Vivian. And so the ERR rate that you're getting from Swing Jazz might be helpful, but again, this is something I gotta test. And then of course, this is going to be geared for like fast, intensive gameplay with a lot of switching. Put a question mark at the end of what I just said though. Like I'm questioning this, because this is just how I'm playing the game in my head, right? Like I'm making playbacks of the game and what they would do in my head until I'm able to test it out. In my head, based off how we see Yanagi play and what we just saw about Vivian, it looks more like they will play like that, right? Like they'll play very well together, where instead of cashing out everything at once, you gain more advantage from using them more calculated. That's the word I'm looking for. Vivian does a thing, Yanagi does a thing, Vivian does a thing, Yanagi does a thing, right? Maybe Ash is in the middle or Seth is in the middle, whatever. This allows Vivian to have an extended attack. Maybe they have something where they swap off, like how Vivian does have actually. With the being in flight mode, she swaps off, she's gonna drop down and do her dive kick anyway. Little things like that might work in your favor. But again, I'll test it. The second one is still gonna be 4-piece Phaethon, but you could probably switch that up to like Hormone if you wanted to, and then 2-piece Chaos or Freedom for the AP boost. This one's going to be a little bit more universal. You're going to be treating Vivian as a better Burnice, quote unquote, or a dual DPS, similar to what I just talked about, where you're pretty much bringing her on and off the field collectively or simultaneously. The difference though is that this one doesn't feel like it's going to be more of a fast-paced, intense gameplay type of team. This one feels a little bit more calculated, if you will, where you're going to be taking advantage of a lot of iframes and cancels. So this is going to be things like how I mentioned earlier with Vivian, where she has the dodge counter, and then if you do her BA4, the attack after that, which I'm going to call BA5, you do BA5, and then it also gives you the perfect dodge counter properties, or using Yanagi's EX skill if you happen to be using that, so you can parry, using Burnice so that Burnice can kind of get away from the enemies spin around them, do whatever. Or in Miyabi's case, Miyabi having such long animations with plenty of iframes, and you essentially double down on that with Vivian. The final bit here that I want to talk about is going to be the W engines. The W engines, I think, are going to be pretty free to play friendly, to be fair. The signature is the Sig. That's obviously going to be number one. Flame Maker, I think might be pretty interesting due to the energy regen that it gives you, as well as the, is it AP? I think it's AP that it gives you as well. It might be AM, but Anomaly something, right? It gives you a bunch of stacks of that as well. And it's not really catered towards, you know, electro or fire or whatever. Also, Yanagi's W engine is still technically bugged. I'm not going to go too much into detail on that. Like, you can ask and I'll probably answer in the questions in the comment section, but TLDR, Yanagi's W engine is supposed to only work for electric, but it works for everything. We don't know why. They haven't fixed it. It just does. So if you have it or a spare, I guess you could use that too. And then lastly would be Fusion Compiler, because that technically is free to play. It's something that you can get for free through the use of pulling in the character or failing a 75-25, whatever. But Fusion Compiler probably works too. This would probably let you run something like a double pin on Vivian, to be fair, or maybe you don't actually need the pin disk and the W engine would just work for you in that regard. And now that I think about that, that probably would be better, right? Because if DOTs work the same way they do in like Star or other games, if you can penetrate the defense and shred on top of that, even though it doesn't work because it's whole like the multiplicative thing or the additive thing that we have in the game right now, so like defense shred and pin values don't work, the concept of damage over time, if you penetrate something, right, like you just, hey, I'm ignoring whatever this resistance is, it does way more damage. So I feel like penetration value might be important on her. Who knows? Someone do the math. The difference between these won't be damage. It's probably going to be or rather the damage difference between these W engines probably isn't large, but I think the engine effects are what's going to be really important. And then the last ones that I want to talk about are going to be Electro Lip Gloss, Roaring Ride, and Weeping Gemini. All of them seem to be excellent free-to-play option for the character. And with that, we are done. I think those are all the notes that I wrote about Vivian from the live stream in terms of like how I'm feeling on the character, and I just want to share that with you guys before we actually jump in the CE server, so that if you do develop any questions, we're going to use this time, go ahead and ask me in the comments. I might make a community post over the weekend and you guys just drop some ideas, team ideas, what you want to test, whatever the case may be, and I'll try and tackle it. I'll actually try and use CE server a lot this time, right? I'll try and tackle it for y'all to see what's going on and just kind of pick and choose what's going there. But that's it. Video's 30 minutes. I don't know how I yapped for that long. I still got to do one for Hugo. I can't say my usual outro because it's inappropriate for YouTube. Like the video, comment, subscribe. Smell you later.